Percy Shelley's list of classic fantastic works. Percy Shelley was a co-author of the novel Frankenstein with his partner and later wife Mary. And in the first edition of that book, Percy wrote a preface in which he tried to defend it. He was concerned that since it was in the genre of Gothic fiction, which was associated with disreputable behavior of all kinds, with outrageous things that might not be approved of in print, he was afraid that his novel and Mary's novel would be rejected out of hand as trash. So he defended the idea of writing horror fiction, and especially, or more broadly, fantastic fiction. He said that what would make it good is if it holds true to the elementary principles of human nature. And by that he seems to have meant the psychology. The people needed to react to supernatural events or fantastic events the way real people would. So he went on to offer some examples of great works from literature, works that he was sure everyone would agree were great, and which make great use of the fantastic. So that's the source of this list. And he had essentially 5 items on his list that I'll go through here. Number 1, the Iliad. The Iliad, if you don't know, is an epic poem from ancient Greece, often considered the foundation of all Western literature. Its topic, basically it's about a war between two nations, Troy on the one hand, and opposing them this loose confederation of Greek city-states that were just kind of coming together as a result of this war to fight as a unified nation. The cause behind the war was the abduction of somebody's wife. Helen of Troy was, or Helen not yet of Troy, but wife of a Greek general named Menelaus, was either seduced or kidnapped by this Trojan prince named Paris, and all kinds of stuff followed from that. Not just the Trojan War, but all kinds of other stuff, and there's even a long backstory behind it. So it's rooted deep in the myth, and in the Iliad, it's the basis of the warfare. Okay, it's a great story, but what's fantastic about it? Well, the first thing that strikes me as fantasy about it is that it basically is about superheroes. They didn't call them that, they called them heroes, but they had superpowers. So, for example, many of them were supernaturally strong, much stronger than other human beings. People like Ajax, for example, one of the Greek heroes. They had other superpowers as well. So, for example, Achilles was invulnerable. The only way you could hurt him was to shoot him in the heel. That's because when he was a baby, his mother dipped him in a sacred river, and she held him by the heel to put him in. And so he was completely invulnerable all over except for that heel where she was holding him. And so the various heroes have various powers basically related to their prowess in war. And then, in addition to these superhero type characters, there are literally gods. The gods not only sit in heaven and are prayed to, but they also physically come down and get involved in the fights, where they turn out to be surprisingly inept, most of them. And they remind me of the manager characters in professional wrestling, where they sort of come in, do something stupid, take a big bump, and then are chased off, and then the warriors are left to fight it out. Okay, so everyone in Shelley's time would agree that the Iliad was maybe the very greatest work of literature, and he says it's fantastic as well. Okay, his next example is a big category, the tragic poetry of Greece. So these Greek tragedies, again, of course, widely respected in his time, universally respected among readers of Western literature, and still widely read today. So some examples that you will have heard of, even if you're not into this sort of thing, are Oedipus Rex by Sophocles and the version of Medea by Euripides. In these plays, and there are 33 of them overall that we have left, out of the many more that were written. The ones that we have are written basically just by three authors: Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. And all of them are about some hero, some guy from mythology who in some way gets too big for his britches. He's somehow needs to be taken down a peg. He offends the gods somehow, and as a result he meets some sort of a hideous fate. He gets killed, or his family gets killed, or he gets transformed. Something bad happens to him. For example, in the play called The Bacchae by Euripides, the main arrogant protagonist is driven insane so that he goes around cross-dressing for a while. This is supposed to be humiliating to him. And then his mother and many other ladies are driven into a Bacchic frenzy. They go mad with their religious intensity, and they rip this guy apart and devour him. So the guy's punishment is he's turned into a cross-dresser and then devoured by his own mother and her friends. So yeah, some bad things happen to these guys. What other kinds of fantastic events happened in the Greek tragedies? Well, again, there were gods. There were also things like witchcraft and divination. Here's kind of an obscure one. This is from Sophocles' play Oedipus at Colonus, and he talks about what will happen if, after his death, somebody tries to attack his allies. He says that he'll rise from the dead to defend them. He puts it this way: "My corpse will rise from sleep, from the gelid cold of the tomb. I'll bring myself awake with gulps of their hot gore." So, kind of a vampire image there. So that's Percy Shelley's second category of great fantastic literature. Okay, for the last three items on the list, he's going to get more specific than that, though. He mentions The Tempest by William Shakespeare. In The Tempest, this alchemist has wizard-like powers. There's basically a gesture toward them being scientifically derived, but basically he's a wizard. And he has powers like controlling the weather and casting illusions. The other fantastic element that people always remember from this one is Caliban the monster. Caliban is the son of a witch who used to live on the island before she was driven out by the wizard. And Caliban himself goes around, he seems to be half fish, half man, and he goes around lusting for human women. Kind of a classic King Kong type of monster, long before King Kong. Alright, next we have one more work by Shakespeare, and that's A Midsummer Night's Dream. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, the plot's pretty flimsy. A couple of young couples are lost in the woods. Their romantic misunderstandings. She loves him, but he loves her, that sort of thing. And it's some pretty broad comedy. At the same time, there's an even broader comedy plot going on about some rude mechanicals, that is, some working class guys who are trying to put on a play in honor of their king's upcoming wedding. He's wedding the Queen of the Amazons, by the way. So this is drawn loosely from Greek myth, but really more from the idea of fairies, from the sort of native English myths that Shakespeare knew about. And these fairies do all the magic within the story. So they cast those illusions, they are able to travel to the far side of the world in the wink of an eye, and so forth. The most colorful part is that they take one of the rude mechanicals and transform him so that he has the head of a donkey. So, and then the queen of the fairies is made by her husband to fall in love with the donkey guy. This all sounds preposterous, and it is, but in performance, this play is just great, and the poetry is magnificent, and the imagery, everything else about it is just wonderful. But it's a fun, fantastic sort of thing. A lot of what I talk about on this channel is about horror, but this is really closer to what you might call fantasy in a modern sense. Okay, then there's one last work that Percy Shelley put on his list, and he put it higher than all the others, and that is Paradise Lost by John Milton. In Paradise Lost, we see Satan and his band of rebel angels rebel against God and be thrown into the fiery pit, the lake of fire. And that part's really exciting and has great imagery. This is the fantastic part that Percy Shelley was mostly interested in. It goes on and it tells the whole creation story about Adam and Eve and prefiguring Jesus and all this. And the rest of that is kind of famously boring compared to the demon part at the beginning. Milton was sort of discovering what a lot of writers have discovered since, that evil kind of makes for a better story because the good guys are just good guys, and why do you want to hear about them? In Paradise Lost, there are demons, but Milton is kind of interested in explaining everything else that you've heard about from mythology, so he folds in pagan gods and monsters as demons or minions of demons. The goddess Isis, for example, an Egyptian goddess, is here working for Satan. So everybody's evil except for the Christian God and Jesus. Okay, and that brings us to the end of Percy Shelley's list of great, fantastic works, all in service of explaining why it was just fine that he and the wife wrote Frankenstein and why you should take it seriously as literature.